I was just a shy intern making copies and fetching coffee when I saw an elderly man standing alone in our busy corporate lobby, clearly frustrated as person after person walked past him without a second glance. When I realized he was deaf and trying to communicate, I approached him and signed a simple, "Hello, can I help you?" I had no idea that the CEO of the company was watching from the mezzanine above. Before we dive in, I'm curious, have you ever learned a skill to help someone you love? Tell me about it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Now, let me take you back to that life-changing Tuesday morning. 6 months ago, I was the most invisible person at Meridian Communications. At 22, I was a junior marketing intern who spent her days making photocopies, organizing supply closets, and trying to blend into the background of one of Chicago's most prestigious advertising agencies. I was the kind of person who ate lunch alone at her desk, who took the stairs instead of the elevator to avoid small talk, and who had never spoken up in a meeting. Not once. I hadn't always been this way. In high school, I'd been confident, outgoing, even popular, but college had been a series of small failures and rejections that had slowly chipped away at my self-esteem. By the time I graduated with my communications degree, I felt like a shadow of my former self. The internship at Meridian was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to prove myself in the real world. Instead, it had become another place where I felt small and insignificant. The only thing that gave my life real meaning was my little brother, Danny. He was 8 years old and had been born deaf. While our parents had struggled to learn sign language, I had thrown myself into it with a passion that surprised everyone, including myself. I spent hours practicing, watching videos, taking classes at the community center. Danny became my motivation to master something that mattered, something that could make a real difference in someone's life. By the time I started at Meridian, I was fluent in American Sign Language. It was the one skill I possessed that I was truly proud of, though it had never seemed relevant to my work life. In the corporate world of marketing campaigns and client presentations, my ability to communicate with the deaf community felt like a beautiful but useless talent, like being able to play the violin in a world that only valued electric guitars. The morning that changed everything started like any other. It was a Tuesday in October, and the Meridian building was buzzing with its usual frenetic energy. We were in the middle of preparing for a major client presentation, and everyone was stressed, rushed, and focused on their own urgent tasks. I was stationed at the reception area, helping to organize materials for the presentation, when I noticed him. He was an elderly man, probably in his 70s, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit that looked expensive and well-tailored. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and he carried himself with the kind of quiet dignity that spoke of a lifetime of success and respect. But there was something in his eyes, a mixture of frustration and sadness, that made my heart ache. He was standing at the reception desk trying to communicate with Jessica, our head receptionist. Jessica was a perfectly nice person, but she was also incredibly busy and clearly growing impatient with whatever communication barrier was occurring. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I don't understand what you're trying to tell me. Do you have an appointment? Can you write down who you're here to see?" The man was gesturing, pointing toward the elevators, his mouth moving in what I realized were words that Jessica couldn't hear. And then I saw it. The subtle hand movements, the facial expressions, the way he was trying to fingerspell something. He was signing. I watched in growing dismay as Jessica turned to help another visitor, effectively dismissing the elderly man. He stood there for a moment, looking lost and increasingly distressed. Other employees walked past him, account executives in expensive suits, creative directors with their arms full of presentation boards, junior associates rushing to meetings. Not one of them stopped. Not one of them seemed to notice that this distinguished-looking man needed help. My first instinct was to stay where I was. I was just an intern. I had my own tasks to complete. My supervisor, Margaret, had made it clear that my job was to support the presentation prep, not to get involved in reception duties. But as I watched the man's shoulders slump slightly, as I saw the defeat creeping into his posture, I thought about Danny. I thought about how it felt when people ignored him, when they looked through him as if his deafness made him invisible. I made a choice that would change my life forever. I walked over to the reception desk, my heart pounding with nervousness. The man looked up as I approached, and I could see the wariness in his eyes, the expectation of another person who would try to rush him along or dismiss his needs. I took a deep breath and signed, "Hello, my name is Catherine. Can I help you?" The transformation in his face was immediate and profound. His eyes widened with surprise and relief, and a smile spread across his features, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since he'd entered the building. "You sign," he responded, his hands moving with the fluid grace of someone who had been using ASL for decades. Thank goodness. I was beginning to think no one here would be able to understand me. "I'm so sorry you've been having trouble," I signed back. "What can I help you with?" "I'm here to see my son," he explained, "but I'm not sure how to reach him. I don't have an appointment, and the young woman at the desk," he gestured toward Jessica, who was now helping someone else. "She seemed very busy." "What's your son's name?" I asked. "I can help you find him." The man paused for a moment, and I could see something complicated pass across his face, a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "Michael Hartwell," he signed finally. My heart nearly stopped. Michael Hartwell, the CEO of Meridian Communications, the man whose name was on the building directory, whose corner office occupied the entire top floor, whose rare appearances in the common areas of the building caused a ripple of nervous energy among the staff. "Mr. Hartwell is your son?" I signed, trying to keep my surprise from showing on my face. "Yes," he confirmed. "I know he's very busy, but I was hoping, well, I was in the neighborhood, and I thought perhaps I could see him for just a few minutes." I could see the vulnerability in his expression, the way he was trying to appear casual about what was clearly an important visit. This was a father who wanted to see his son, and I realized with a growing sense of sadness that he probably didn't feel entirely welcome in his own son's workplace. "Of course," I signed. "Let me see what I can do. Would you like to have a seat while I make some calls?" I guided him to the comfortable seating area in the lobby, making sure he had a clear view of me so we could continue communicating. Then I faced my first major challenge. How does a lowly intern arrange a meeting between a visitor and the CEO of the company? I started with Mr. Hartwell's executive assistant, a formidable woman named Patricia, who guarded access to the CEO like a dragon protecting treasure. When I called her extension, her voice was crisp and professional. "Mr. Hartwell's office? This is Patricia." "Hi, Patricia. This is Catherine Walsh from the intern program. I have a visitor here in the lobby who says he's Mr. Hartwell's father, and he'd like to see him if possible." There was a long pause. "His father?" "Yes, ma'am. An elderly gentleman, very well dressed. He's been waiting in the lobby." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll need to check with Mr. Hartwell. Can you have the visitor wait?" "Of course. Thank you." I hung up and returned to Mr. Hartwell, Robert, as he'd introduced himself, to let him know that we were working on arranging the meeting. While we waited, we talked. Or rather, we signed, and I discovered that Robert Hartwell was one of the most interesting people I'd ever met. He told me about his career as an architect, how he'd designed several of the buildings that now made up Chicago's skyline. He told me about his late wife, Michael's mother, who had been a teacher at the Illinois School for the Deaf. He told me about the challenges of raising a hearing son as a deaf parent, and the pride he felt in Michael's success, even though they didn't see each other as often as he'd like. "He's always been driven," Robert signed, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. Even as a child, he wanted to prove himself, to show the world that having a deaf father didn't hold him back. I'm proud of what he's accomplished, but sometimes I worry that he's forgotten how to slow down, how to just be. As we talked, I became increasingly aware that we were drawing attention. Other employees were glancing our way, some with curiosity, others with what looked like annoyance. I could see Jessica at the reception desk fielding questions about why there was some kind of sign language conversation happening in the lobby. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Patricia called back to say that Mr. Hartwell was in back-to-back meetings and wouldn't be available for at least another hour. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, though he tried to hide it. "Perhaps I should come back another time," he signed. "I don't want to be a bother." "You're not a bother," I assured him. "Would you like to wait a little longer? I can show you around the building if you'd like. We have some beautiful artwork on the upper floors." His face lit up. "I would love that. I haven't seen where Michael works." And so began what would later be described as the most unauthorized building tour in Meridian Communications history. I should have been organizing presentation materials. I should have been making copies and updating spreadsheets. Instead, I spent the next 2 hours giving Robert Hartwell a comprehensive tour of his son's company. We started with the creative department, where I introduced Robert to some of the graphic designers and copywriters. Most of them were polite but clearly busy, offering quick hellos before returning to their work. But a few were genuinely interested in meeting him, especially when I explained that he was an architect and could appreciate the design elements of their campaigns. I translated conversations, helped Robert understand the work that was being done, and watched his face light up with pride as he learned more about the company his son had built. We visited the account management floor, where Robert was fascinated by the client relationship strategies. We even stopped by the break room, where he shared stories about the coffee shops he used to frequent in his younger days. Throughout the tour, I was acutely aware that I was neglecting my assigned duties. My phone buzzed with increasingly urgent texts from Margaret, my supervisor, asking where I was and reminding me of the tasks I was supposed to be completing. But every time I looked at Robert's face, saw the joy and interest in his eyes as he learned about his son's world, I couldn't bring myself to cut the tour short. It was during our visit to the marketing analytics department that I first noticed him. Michael Hartwell was standing on the mezzanine level that overlooked the main floor, partially hidden behind a pillar. He was watching us, watching his father interact with his employees, watching me translate conversations and facilitate connections. I couldn't see his expression clearly from that distance, but something about his posture suggested he'd been there for a while. My heart started racing. The CEO was watching me give an unauthorized tour, while I was supposed to be working on presentation materials. I was probably about to be fired, and I was definitely about to get Robert in trouble for disrupting the workplace. But when I glanced back a few seconds later, he was gone. We continued the tour, visiting the conference rooms where major client presentations took place, the library where the company's award-winning campaigns were displayed, and finally, the executive floor. Robert was particularly interested in this area, asking questions about the decision-making processes and the leadership structure of the company. "Michael built all of this?" he signed, looking around the elegant executive suite with its polished wood paneling and original artwork. "He did," I confirmed. "The company has grown tremendously under his leadership. Everyone here has a lot of respect for him." Robert nodded, but I could see something wistful in his expression. "I'm proud of him," he signed. "I just wish—" "What do you wish?" I asked gently. "I wish I knew him better as an adult. When he was young, we were very close, but as he got older, especially after his mother died, he seemed to feel like he needed to take care of everything himself. He stopped asking for help, stopped sharing his problems with me. I think he thought my deafness made me fragile, that he needed to protect me from his worries." My heart ached for both of them, for Robert, who clearly loved his son deeply but felt shut out of his life, and for Michael, who had probably been trying to be strong and independent but had inadvertently created distance between them. It was nearly 3 p.m. when we finally returned to the lobby. Robert's scheduled meeting time had long passed, and I could see that he was beginning to accept that he wouldn't be seeing his son today.
"Thank you, Catherine," he signed, his hands moving with sincere gratitude. "This has been wonderful. I feel like I understand Michael's world so much better now, and I've enjoyed getting to know you. You remind me of my late wife. She had the same kind heart, the same way of making people feel seen and valued." "It's been my pleasure," I signed back, and I meant it. Despite the anxiety I felt about neglecting my work duties, the afternoon had been one of the most meaningful I'd experienced since starting at Meridian. As Robert prepared to leave, I saw Margaret approaching from across the lobby. My supervisor's face was a mask of barely controlled anger, and I knew I was about to face the consequences of my choices. "Catherine," Margaret said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "I need to speak with you, now." I turned to Robert to explain that I had to go, but before I could sign anything, a voice behind me said, "Actually, Margaret, I need to speak with Miss Walsh first."
I turned around and found myself face to face with Michael Hartwell himself. He was tall, probably in his early 50s, with the same intelligent eyes as his father, and an air of quiet authority that made it clear why he was successful in business. But there was something else in his expression, something that looked like emotion carefully held in check. "Mr. Hartwell?" Margaret stammered, clearly as surprised as I was. "I was just about to discuss Ms. Walsh's absence from her assigned duties today. She was supposed to be helping my father," Michael said, quietly, his eyes never leaving my face. Which, from what I observed, she did beautifully. The lobby seemed to go quiet around us. Margaret's mouth opened and closed without sound. Robert was looking back and forth between his son and me with growing understanding and delight. "Dad," Michael said, and for the first time, I heard his voice soften. He turned to his father and began to sign, slowly, somewhat clumsily, but with obvious effort and care. "I'm sorry I kept you waiting. I didn't know you were here until—" He paused, glancing at me, then continued signing. "Until I saw you with Catherine. I've been watching you two for the past hour. I haven't seen you look that happy in years." Robert's face was radiant, with joy and surprise. "You've been learning to sign?" "I've been trying," Michael admitted, his hands moving more confidently now. "I should have done it years ago. I should have made more effort to communicate with you in your language, instead of always expecting you to adapt to mine." Father and son embraced then, right there in the middle of the busy lobby, and I felt tears spring to my eyes. Around us, the usual bustle of the office had slowed, as people stopped to watch this unexpected reunion. When they separated, Michael turned back to me. "Ms. Walsh, could I speak with you in my office? There are some things I'd like to discuss." My heart was pounding as I followed Michael Hartwell to the elevator, with Robert walking beside us. Margaret had disappeared, probably to process what had just happened and figure out how to handle the fact that her intern had just been personally requested by the CEO. The executive elevator was silent, except for the soft hum of machinery. I kept glancing at Robert, who was practically glowing with happiness, and at Michael, whose expression was unreadable but intense. Michael's office was everything I had imagined and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a breathtaking view of the Chicago skyline, elegant furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary, and walls lined with awards and photographs documenting the company's success. But what struck me most was how impersonal it felt, how little of Michael himself was visible in the space. "Please, sit," Michael said, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. Robert and I sat down, and Michael took the chair next to his father, rather than behind his desk, a small gesture that somehow made the conversation feel more personal. "Miss Walsh," Michael began, "I owe you an apology, and an explanation." I looked at him in confusion. "An apology? Sir, I'm the one who should be apologizing. I know I was supposed to be working on the presentation materials, and instead I—"
He held up a hand to stop me.
You did exactly what you should have done, what I wish more of my employees would do." He paused, looking at his father with an expression that was equal parts love and regret. "My father has visited this office exactly 3 times in the 10 years since I became CEO. Each time, he's been treated like an inconvenience, a disruption to the important work happening here. Each time, I've watched from a distance as my own employees, people I pay, people who represent my company, have made him feel unwelcome in his own son's workplace." Robert reached over and touched his son's arm, signing something I couldn't quite catch. Michael nodded and continued. "Today was different. Today, I watched a 22-year-old intern abandon her assigned duties to spend 3 hours making my father feel valued, respected, and included. I watched her translate conversations, facilitate connections, and treat him not as a burden or an obstacle, but as an honored guest." His voice grew thick with emotion. "I watched her give him something I haven't given him in years, the feeling that he belongs in my world." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "Mr. Hartwell, I have a younger brother who's deaf, and I know how it feels when people ignore him or treat him like he's invisible. I couldn't stand to see that happen to your father." "And that," he said, "is exactly why I need to talk to you about your future here." My heart sank. This was it, the gentle letdown before the termination. "I understand if you need to let me go," I said quietly. "I know I didn't do my assigned work today." Michael looked genuinely surprised. "Let you go? Miss Walsh, I want to offer you a job. A real job, not an internship." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "What I witnessed today showed me something that's been missing from this company, a genuine commitment to inclusion and accessibility. We talk about diversity and inclusion in our mission statement, we have policies in our employee handbook, but we don't live it. We don't embody it. I want to change that, and I want you to help me do it." Robert was beaming, signing rapidly to his son. Michael smiled and signed back, then turned to me. "I'm creating a new position, Director of Accessibility and Inclusion. It would be your job to ensure that Meridian Communications is truly accessible to everyone, employees, clients, and visitors. You'd develop training programs, create policies, and serve as an advocate for people who might otherwise be overlooked or excluded. You'd report directly to me." I felt dizzy. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm just an intern. I don't have experience in human resources or policy development. I don't even have my degree yet. I'm still finishing my last semester." "You have something more valuable than experience. You have empathy. You have the ability to see people as individuals rather than inconveniences. And you have a skill set that could transform how this company operates." He paused. "The position would come with a substantial salary, full benefits, and the authority to implement real change. You'd report directly to me." I looked at Robert, who was practically vibrating with excitement, then back to Michael. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Michael suggested. "Take the weekend. But I hope you'll say yes. This company needs someone like you. I need someone like you." The rest of the meeting was a blur of details about the position, discussions of salary and benefits that made my head spin, and planning for the cultural changes that would need to happen throughout the organization. By the time I left Michael's office, my entire life had been turned upside down. Robert hugged me goodbye, signing his thanks over and over again. "You've given me my son back," he told me, "and you've given him something he didn't even know he was missing." Michael walked us to the elevator, and as the doors were closing, he said, "Catherine, thank you for seeing him, for seeing what was important." I went home that night and called my parents, then Danny, trying to explain what had happened. Danny was the most excited of all. "You're going to help other deaf people at work?" he signed when I video called him. "That's so cool. You're going to be like a superhero for people like me." His enthusiasm was infectious, and by Monday morning, I knew what my answer would be. I started my new position the following week. My first task was to conduct an accessibility audit of the entire building and all company policies. What I found was both disappointing and motivating. Meridian Communications, like many companies, had been operating with good intentions, but little actual understanding of what inclusion really meant. Over the next 6 months, I implemented sweeping changes. We installed visual alert systems throughout the building. We brought in ASL interpreters for all company meetings and events. We created accessibility guidelines for all marketing materials and client presentations. Most importantly, we instituted mandatory inclusion training for all employees, starting with the executive team. The training sessions were eye-opening for everyone involved. I brought in speakers from the deaf community, including Robert, who shared his experiences and helped employees understand the impact of their actions, or inactions. I taught basic sign language classes during lunch hours and was amazed by how many people were eager to learn. Margaret, my former supervisor, was one of my most enthusiastic students. "I keep thinking about that day," she told me after one of our training sessions. "I was so focused on the presentation, on the tasks that seemed urgent, that I completely missed what was actually important. I don't want to make that mistake again." The changes weren't just about accessibility for the deaf community. We expanded our efforts to include accommodations for employees and visitors with mobility challenges, visual impairments, and other disabilities. We partnered with local organizations to ensure our hiring practices were truly inclusive. We even redesigned our website and marketing materials to be more accessible. But the most meaningful change was cultural. The company that had once been focused solely on efficiency and productivity began to value empathy and inclusion as core business principles. Employees started looking out for each other in ways they never had before. The lobby that had once been a place where visitors like Robert were ignored became a welcoming space where everyone was treated with dignity and respect. 6 months after that life-changing Tuesday, Meridian Communications won a national award for workplace inclusion. At the ceremony, Michael asked me to accept the award on behalf of the company. This recognition belongs to everyone at Meridian who embraced change and chose to see inclusion not as a burden, but as an opportunity to become better, I said in my acceptance speech. But mostly, it belongs to a wise man who taught me that the most important business skill isn't knowing how to close a deal or manage a budget, it's knowing how to see the humanity in every person you encounter. In the audience, Robert was beaming with pride, signing his applause. Next to him, Michael was smiling too, and I could see the relationship between father and son had been transformed. They had lunch together every Friday now, and Michael had become fluent enough in ASL to have real conversations with his father about everything from business strategy to family memories. The shy intern who had once felt invisible had found her voice by helping others find theirs. And in the process, I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply notice someone who's being overlooked and choose to see them, really see them, as the valuable human being they are. My little brother Danny visited the office regularly now, and watching him interact confidently with employees who had learned to sign just for him never failed to make me emotional. He was right. I had become a kind of superhero. Not the cape-wearing kind, but the kind that fights for a world where everyone belongs, where everyone is seen, where everyone matters. The best part was that it had all started with a simple hello, signed to a lonely man in a busy lobby. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stop, to notice, to care. And sometimes when you're brave enough to reach out to someone who's been overlooked, you discover that you're not just changing their world, you're changing your own. An absolutely beautiful story about how a simple act of inclusion can transform lives and entire organizations.
What do you think of Catherine's decision to abandon her assigned tasks to help Robert? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were inspired by this incredible story of compassion and change, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more uplifting stories that celebrate the power of human kindness. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.